Hi.
Folks, folks, just a heads up that we'll be recording this meeting. So yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ilham. So I recently started working with Cellery. I worked for WSO2 from 2014 to 2018. So now I'm in North America. So working for a customer who is interested in Cellery. So I just came here to educate myself.
All right, great. Nice to have you today joining us, Hiram.
And thanks.
Okay, we will wait few more minutes, I guess, for if someone else is joining.
So as you said, like you are recording this these sessions. Do you guys have the previous sessions recorded video? So
Actually, Irham, we only had one community call prior to this, and we have recorded it but haven't hosted it yet. We'll host it ASAP, and we'll share the links with you.
okay, thank you very much.
All right. So I think Madhuka, yeah, let's start the session.
Okay. Okay, so today's discussion is setting up Cellery Runtime. So if you guys remember, during our last meeting call, we initialized the project, then we built those cell and composite images, and we finally ran those images and finally created running instances. And similarly, there are other couple of CLI commands like listing and deleting images and terminating instances and so on. And apart from them, there are another set of commands called Cellery setup. Through the Cellery setup, we have integrated the process of creating and managing Cellery runtime into our Cellery CLI. Then the users can get started with Cellery. And another difference with the setup commands is that there is an interactive mode compared to the normal CLI commands. So if I show you, if I go to the console and execute Cellery setup, we can see that there is an interactive mode and users can select between these options. For instance, if we go to create, then there are options like create GCP and existing and so on. So anyway, we need to keep in mind that there is an equivalent command for each and every these interactive mode commands. For instance, if a user try to create a Cellery GCP setup, for instance, like if I go to create setup create GCP, there is an equivalent command like Cellery setup create GCP, and there he can give a flag like -c, which stands for complete, and he could achieve the same outcome. And for today's demonstration, I would be using the interactive mode. So the Cellery setup command basically has like 5 subcommands like create, status, modify, switch, and cleanup. And I will go through each of them in detail. So first, the users can create a Cellery runtime using our Cellery CLI. So basically, our Cellery setup is very versatile in the sense that we can cater for different users with different requirements as well as different resources. For instance, if they want to download the VM, they can use local setup, and if they have GCP cluster, they can use the GCP approach. Or else, if they have an already running Kubernetes cluster, they can use the third option of using that existing cluster. So basically, there are 3 approaches for creating a Cellery runtime. Okay, so if I go to Cellery setup, in here create, if they go to here create, there will be three options, local, GCP, and existing. So if the first approach is the local setup. So this is the most straightforward approach. Basically, the users only need to have VirtualBox installed in their machines. And the second requirement is to have Kubernetes client version of 1.13, 14, or 1.15. And here, basically, we have created a virtual machine with pre-installed kubeadmin, and the Cellery runtime is running on top of that. So we have, from time to time, we are updating this virtual machine, and we have compressed it and created a zip file, and we have hosted it in the AWS server. And our Cellery CLI downloads this zip file and extract that zip file and eventually creates a virtual machine in the user's machine. So since this is a very time constraint, I have pre-recorded some Cellery commands. So since this create takes a lot of time, I will explain it through this. So if you can see my screen, I can execute Cellery setup. Then, as I explained before, there are a couple of options. Then there are three options: local, GCP, and existing cluster. If I select local, furthermore, there are two options. One is the basic setup, and the other one is the complete setup. The main difference between the basic and complete setups is that the complete setup has API and gateway and the observability portal. So depending on the user's requirement, for instance, if they want to have the capability of observability, then they can select the complete setup. And if not, they can straightforwardly jump into the basic setup, which is like half the size of the complete setup. So if I select complete, it would prompt me a confirmation message saying it would require 3.57 GB from your machine, and it would ask for my confirmation. And if I select yes, it would start downloading this image. So as you can see, the users can view the progress bar and the amount of data that is being downloaded, and the percentage of the completion, and the current download speed, and the ETA. So I will fast forward this until the download process is completed. So few more minutes, and then now the download process is completed, and it has extracted the zip file, and now it's installing the runtime. So finally, when it is installed, it will be checking for the cluster status and whether each and every pods are up and running. So it would take a few more seconds, and okay, now everything is up and running, and the Cellery is successfully installed. So the users can start with their Cellery projects. Okay, so that is the first approach. And after that is done, what the users have to do is update their etc host file with its following entry. Basically, this is the IP address of the V virtual machine, 192.168.56.10, and they can go to their etc host file, and then they can add that entry, and then they can start on with their Cellery projects. That's it. So that's the local setup. So the second approach is using a GCP. So similar to before, they need to have the Kubernetes client version of 1.13, 14, or 1.15. And here in this use case, they need to initialize a GCP project. For that, they can execute this gcloud init command if they haven't created a GCP project already. And if I execute gcloud init, it would ask me to, there are a couple of options like create a new configuration or reinitialize this configuration itself. So I have created a project. My region is US West 1B, zone is this, and my account name is there, and my project is victim. So I won't reinitialize it. So this is the project we have created, victim, and once that is done, they can make sure that the regions and zones and everything is set accordingly by executing gcloud conflict list command and make sure everything is good to go. And another thing to keep in mind is that they need to enable billing. So I have given the link to how to do that. So since we are using a couple of resources from the GCP, we need to enable billing. And if the region and so on is not set properly, they can go to the GCP console itself and go to compute and go to, if I go to compute engine and go to settings, they can view the region and so on. Then they can update these entries, or else they can simply execute this gcloud config set project or set compute region commands, and they can set those values accordingly. Next, they need to enable GCP APIs. So like I said before, we need to access 4 GCP APIs, namely the Cloud Engine API, Kubernetes API, Cloud File Store API, and the Cloud SQL Admin API. So for that, they need to go to the go to API MN service. API MN service, and they can go to the dashboard. From here, they can enable APIs and services. So you can see I have enabled Compute Engine API, Kubernetes Engine API, and Cloud File Store and Cloud SQL Admin. So once that is done, the next thing they need to do is generate an API key to access these 4 APIs. For that, they need to go to IAM and admin and go to services accounts. Here, this is my project. Then they can go to their project. And they can edit. And this would this create button to get enabled, and they can create a key. And they need to make sure it is in the JSON format, and they can create this JSON key. So once that JSON key is created, they can save it, and they have to copy the JSON file to our GCP folder inside Cellery Home. I will show you where that directory is. So I go to Cellery Home, then inside GCP, we need to put that credential JSON file. Here I have put that file. Once that is done, users can start off with setting up Cellery Runtime on that GCP. So since this takes a lot of time, I have pre-recorded that. If I go to the create, if I execute create Cellery setup, and go to GCP. Here also there are two options, like similar to the local setup, basic and complete. And if I could select complete, it would start creating the GCP cluster first. And we have appended this random generated numbers to identify that cluster. So it would firstly create that cluster. So once that cluster is created, we can see that the namespaces are generated, and then now the cluster is there. And then it will start creating the SQL instances, and so on. The other resources also will get created. Then the GCP bucket would get created. Then the NFS server would get created, and finally we would deploy the Cellery runtime. So as you can see here, the Istio system is getting, the namespace is getting enabled, and similarly the Cellery system namespace is now there. And the Knative serving namespace now is also there. And if we observe the pods in the left-hand side, now the controller pod is up and running. And now, since we selected complete setup, now the gateway pod is also getting initialized. And now, finally, the observability pods are getting initialized and up and running. Once everything is getting initialized, then the serial would wait for check the runtime status of the Cellery runtime. Now Istio, Knative, those things are up and running. Only the gateway pod is getting ready. So once everything is done, everything is up and ready, it would now our Cellery runtime is ready, and it will gives a successful message, and the users can start off with their Cellery project now. So here also, after that GCP cluster is created, we need to update our etc host with the Ingress Nginx IP address. For that, the users need to execute this kubectl command, kubectl get nginx, get ingress nginx -n Cellery system, and they can get the IP address, and they can update their etc file with this entry. Like in here, I have updated, and they can start working on their Cellery project and start building a cell image or composite image. And I have put a link to a Medium blog post regarding the setting up Cellery on GCP. You can read that. And the third option is to set up Cellery runtime on an existing cluster. I won't go through much detail, since there are numerous variations, like on Docker for desktop and Minikube and kubeadmin. Here I have put a slide on how to set up Docker Cellery runtime on Docker for Mac. So if I just go through that command, Cellery setup, here if I go to create existing cluster, there are a couple of selections. For instance, they can use persistent volume or non-persistent volume. In persistent volume, their users' data will get persisted, and the non-persistent volume is the volatile method. Their data won't get persisted. So if I select persistent volume, they can then again use an NFS server if they have, or else they can opt not to. And again, similar to GCP and local setup, they have option to select basic and complete. And if I select them, finally it would get prompted the confirmation message, and Cellery runtime would get created on that existing cluster. So here I have mentioned a couple of steps to set up on Docker for Mac. So the minimum requirements we need is CPU is 4 cores, and they need 8 GB memory, and they need to create a directory called var temp Cellery if they are using the persisted volume, and they need to add that location to the Docker for desktop file sharing. If I simply quickly show you that, if I go to Docker for desktop, and go to preferences, here still getting started. Okay. Until that's getting started, I'll go to the next command. So that is how we set up on existing cluster. The next command is setup status. This is how we check the system component status, whether they are enabled or disabled. So if I execute Cellery setup status, so we can see the class name of the cluster. So this is the last GCP cluster I have created, GKE, and cluster name is 56. And we can view the names of the components and their status. API manager, observability scale to 0, these things, everything is enabled. So that is the status command. So the next command is Cellery setup modify. Through modify, we can enable and disable Cellery system components. So if I go to the if I again execute Cellery setup, I have switched to a different cluster, and I have enabled API manager and disabled observability, and then enabled scale to 0 and horizontal pods autoscaler. Now say I want to disable scale to 0 and horizontal pod autoscaler and enable observability. Users can go to Cellery setup, then go to modify, then they can select, I go to observability, I want to enable it, then they can select enable, then they can apply this change straight away, or they can opt to modify another component. So if I want to modify another one, I can go to yes and go to autoscaler. Then there are two options, scale to 0 and horizontal pod autoscaler. I will disable that. Then I will go again and go I would disable HPA as well. So once that is finalized, I can apply this change. If I select no apply change, now I can see these are the modifications which should be applied. It would be enabling observability, and it would be disabling scale 0 and HPA. So I would confirm this modification. So if I check the namespaces, now Knative saving is getting terminated. Similarly, if I check the pods, okay, now the modification is applied. I can show another instance of that modification. If I go to modify, here in this scenario, I have enabled API manager and observability and disabled scale 0 and HPA. Okay, now I'm applying that change. I'll be enabling scale to 0 and HPA while disabling the observability. And I would finalize and apply the change. So here in the right hand side we can see the namespaces, and in the left hand side we can see the pods. And now the observability pods are getting terminated one by one, and the Knative serving is getting enabled. Namespace is now active. Once this all the observability pods get terminated, now the Cellery runtime is modified. Okay. Then the other command is Cellery setup switch. Through this command, users can switch between Cellery runtimes, meaning clusters, so that they can work on different clusters simultaneously. So if I go to this cluster, if I run, now I'm in the local setup. Now I'm in the local setup. So if I check if I list the instances, there is one running instance called foo. If I go to Cellery setup and go to switch, and I go to the last GCP cluster I have created, that is that is 56. So you can see that we have created a label to identify who had created that cluster, and that is 56, I think. So I now check what are the running instances. Now there are no running instances since we have switched from our local setup to this GCP cluster. So that is the switch command. And finally, users can clean up their Cellery runtimes using Cellery setup cleanup. So if I go to if they want to clean up their local runtime, they can just go to Cellery setup and go to manage, then local, then they can clean up, or else they can even stop their virtual machine using stop start. And here they would get prompted to asking if they want to delete that runtime. Furthermore, now since we downloaded that image, the users have the option to retain that downloaded image, or else they can opt to completely wipe that image as well. So if I want to retain that, I can select no. Then that downloaded image won't get deleted. So that is how we clean up the local setup, and they can also clean up the existing cluster. So here I have the cluster name is in my Docker for desktop cluster. Here I have enabled a couple of system components, and now I'm cleaning up similar to local setup. I would get prompted a confirmation message, and I would get asked whether I want to remove the knative serving, Istio, and then ingress engine ingress. Now you can see here everything will start terminating. So now everything have been wiped out. So finally, only this ingress engine namespace is remaining. Now after that gets terminated, the Cellery runtime is cleaned up. Okay. So that is how we clean up the existing cluster. So those are the Cellery CLI commands to create, manage, clean up Cellery runtime. So one thing I need to mention is that most of these commands are implemented during our 0.2 and 0.3 releases, and this time around we are planning to improve the usability and user experience. So if you guys have any feedback or questions, it would be most helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madhukar, for that extensive and informative session on setting up Cellery. I think that will be like very helpful to anyone who is getting started with Cellery. So if our joinees have any questions, I think we should be able to start the discussion now.
I think one of the biggest problem we have is like the local setup is being very big, right? Like because like it's like around 1.2 GB for the basic, and the complete it's again going up to 4 GB. So we have to, I think one of the we may have to find an alternative approach for that too. What do you think? Like I mean, the like using some sort of like K3SO kind, that sort of a thing. What do you guys think? Whether that would work or?
So actually, like I think we have tested a little bit with K3S.
Yeah.
The one of the problems is that like still even if you use K3S, the amount of resources that you have to allocate will be like a bit
Same.
more when it comes to the complete setup.
Yeah,
That's a problem that we need to solve, or like maybe we need to look at better ways of like managing that complexity.
yeah. And one of the biggest problem, I think, when we are downloading it, as it is very big, I mean, if there is an internet, I mean, there has been some situations like the percentage also goes beyond 100%, and you know, and the download fails in the middle and stuff like that. So as it is in the GB level, you know, like that is also having a downside. And I mean, yeah, so at least like if we could get the initial Kubernetes cluster downloaded for them to get started, that would be much more better, I think. But I do understand like there are other complications, even though the resource problem is there. Anyhow, in the current local setup is also it's there, but like in a K3S or something also it will be the same. So it's not, resource allocation is not going to make any differences. But
Correct.
but at least like the download speed and the initial failures, if we could reduce, I think that would be one of the case we can probably think of. Like, yeah. So yeah, I'm just thinking like maybe like we were thinking of trying out K3S and some other stuff, but then again, K3S is having the down. I mean, it's like it's not complete. It's not actual Kubernetes cluster, right? It's like a stripped down version of the Kubernetes cluster. So we may
I
not.
think they only have they don't have these alpha and beta versions of various resources. They only have the released GA ones.
Yeah.
So like there are some compatibility issues like with using K3S. Maybe like we can provide a very stripped down version, but like it will be very much limited. So yeah, maybe we can look at like something like that where we don't use like basically maybe beta versions of auto scaling APIs, etc., and like provide a very stripped down version which uses only the GA, the version 1 Kubernetes API resources. That is something that we can look into. And about that download percentage exceeding 100% issue, I think that we have fixed it already, and like it has been verified. It was there for like I think in the 0.3 and 0.4 years, and now in 0.5 release it has already been fixed.
Okay, so that's
one more thing, like even though we use like lightweight runtimes, we have to cut down if you want to really drastically reduce the size of the installation or the installation time. We have to drastically reduce the size of the Docker images of the control plane. So that is one of the main thing, because in IDP we are using a lightweight one.
I think the main culprit is the global gateway, which is like a bit heavyweight. Maybe like for the most basic setup, like now we have like the web gateway option as well, where you can actually like have just the web API. So like that I don't think requires the global gateway capabilities. So like if you only use that in the most basic setup just to try out, like to get the first initial understanding, like then the resource consumption of the which is like resource consumption of the gateway would be like excluded, and like that will be much less like consumption of resources.
Yeah. So currently, is like what is the size of the basic? I think it's around 2 GB, right?
It's like I think
3.
The basic is like closer to 2.
Yes.
Closer to 2, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, realistically, downloading 2 GB is also a
a
concern. Like,
problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so like maybe we can, I'm not, like we'll have to take a call on this. So maybe like for the most basic setup, without packing the global, uh, the whatever the the global APIM gateways and like having only the minimal stuff.
Yeah, so,
Uh,
like anyhow, for the basic setup, we don't have the global API manager, right? So it's only the
yeah,
IDP.
like yeah, correct. So like we don't have it in the basic setup still, but it's like taking 2
Yeah,
GB
that's the thing. So explore that
size.
the global API manager is the problem, because anyhow, without that also, it's already having an issue.
Yeah, so
So
like I was actually thinking more of the resource consumption, but like still, as you said, yeah, if you can even like minimize that size, maybe like downsizing the VM, that would that be an option?
Yeah, we do strip down. We run a strip down step also when we create the packer. But stripping down the Linux is not going to help that much. Main culprit is the product Docker size. That
so
is the place
one of
Anyway,
the
the operating
we can.
system is going to be there, right? So that will add some additional gigabytes
Yeah, yeah,
because
but we run
that
the strip down, so that means we
that
can
will
add
yeah,
more
that will
packages.
remove the some utility tools, but actual OS kernel and other stuff is there still. Like it will
Yeah,
take
Yeah, yeah.
around
So
two or 3 GB.
yeah, so in that model we have to have some kind of VM, right? So otherwise,
I'm
uh,
really thinking, what if we go with some sort of like, K3 is the only thing is it's not equivalent to a production running setup, but people do have other options of trying it as well. So when we say like people don't have a Kubernetes cluster, they can download a local VM. I think that should be reasonably small. And a lot of people, I think they are also failing in the startup, like because of the download issues and stuff. So
Can't we use like Minikube like directly?
that's
So
hmm.
yeah, like Minikube is much stable and maintained by Kubernetes, like, and it has all the features as running. Like it doesn't remove the alpha features.
Yes.
So maybe we can like from the, if it is local, we can ask install the Minikube, and from the CLI itself we can start up the Minikube with the required
Yeah,
parameters.
that's probably, yeah.
Then apply the YAMLs as existing cluster. So I think
yeah.
Irham,
If you are
hello,
like
are you
starting
there?
with,
yeah, we can hear you.
Hello, Irham.
Hi.
Are there?
Yes, Miraj,
So
we can hear.
you had some issues, right? So when you are installing, we really like to get some feedback from you, like you are Minikube user, right?
Yes, I tried with Minikube, but I was facing some other issues after using the correct versions.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Uh,
stopped using Minikube and started the other way around. Like, so
So
there is
so
something.
is it the Kubernetes version problem here, or some other problem you got?
I corrected the versions and I retried with Minikube, but I couldn't go through. Like, even though once it says it's successful, I
Mm.
couldn't go to the API store URL. So
I think that is
so probably I think that's some kind of a connectivity or IP problem that you're having.
no. Actually, recently I also had a problem. There was some, I think, in some Nginx ingress rules for the, which has HTTPS backend, is not really working with the Minikube. I recently actually found it like somewhere like very closely. So something has gone wrong in that. Maybe probably like I think that the ingresses that we create is not working with the HTTPS backend. So like for an example, HTTP, so you can access like. If you install a web cell, normal Hello World API you can access, Hello World URL you can access, but you can't access the IDP, neither API manager or anything because of that. So I also face the problem. I think it's not because of the IP issue. We have to look into it. There is an Nginx thing. I think I talked to Deep as well. It wasn't working.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird issue because it's the same thing work with the kube admin and also
So
so we have to check.
So there's a thing like, so in Minikube they provide their own ingress. So
But the thing is, even if I delete that ingress and put my own ingress Miraj, things didn't work.
Okay. So
so something fishy, but that was the case. Maybe they are doing some. I don't know. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
I was able to get it with from like any other things, but Minikube as I remember, long time back it was working, but recently it didn't work.
Okay, so like we'll have to probably like check this in more detail.
Yeah.
As Miraj mentioned as well, like starting against an existing minimal cluster such as Minikube would be a potential solution to our like download size problem.
Yes, I also believe. How big Minikube is? It's not that big, right? I haven't faced an issue.
No, they have like very minimal Linux kernel. Like they are like we use Ubuntu, no. So they have like the Linux kernel built on from the ground up. Like so, like in Rancher guys, they have K3 OS or something, right?
Oh yeah.
So similarly, like they have very minimal Linux kernel and only required tool to run the Docker and Kubernetes.
Essentials tools are packs here, so like that's like very I think minimal. So that's I think a good option for us to explore like for this issue. So that so like probably we'll have to like check more into that.
Yeah.
So Iram, so like currently like what you are using you are like trying to get this set up in the local setup?
Yes. So after that, I didn't go for Minikube. I did local, so I can go to the store now.
Okay.
I see. So, that's great.
But I have to install this on the customer's environment on December 12th. So maybe that time everything would, I would be able to do that. So that's kind of, they have an existing Kubernetes cluster. So we have to find, that is on-premise, not running on a cloud. So we are going to install Cellery. So that is the
okay,
plan.
that so may have like their own ingress and others.
Sorry, Miraj, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So I was just about to ask, do you know what is the Kubernetes version that they are using in their existing cluster?
No, I can ask them today. Yeah, I'll get it today.
Yeah, maybe like they have like configure already like ingress and other stuff like so. When we are installing, like we have to think about that we are installing the ingress on top of that, no? So then they are two running ingresses in the cluster. So for the existing system, maybe that's the optional thing because that's anyway like for a cluster we need the ingress now some.
Yeah, probably they have their already
installed
their
own ingress. Like, maybe
it can be either Nginx or something different, completely different.
Yeah, completely different. So like Ilham, like they are using any kind of a service mesh or like do you have any idea about that?
Yes, they are using STO.
Okay.
But they just briefly explain it to me. I don't know the exact versions of anything.
Okay. So they probably use STO ingress, right?
Maybe. Yeah, I didn't ask those questions. So they explain only the basic stuff.
Yeah, cool. That will be helpful. Like, so we may need to like redesign.
So yeah. So do you guys have any preferred Kubernetes version that Cellery 0.5 would support?
Yeah, it's 1.14 is the preferred version, but you can actually bump up a version or go down a version below. Like, so for example, if you go to, that's not our standard, that's how Kubernetes say, like they have policy. So if you get a version like 1.14, you can actually use 1.15 client or 1.13 client. So other way, and also the other way around, like if you have a kubectl with 1.14, you can point it to a kube API server with 1.15 and 1.13. So that's one above or one below is okay. Other than that, it may work, it may not. We don't know like what the consequences are.
But like with 116, I don't think anyway it will
Yeah,
work because like
116,
there
yeah,
are lots
probably
of
not
like
work because they deprecate lot of
yeah,
stuff.
stuff. So like yeah, so that's why Iram, I actually asked you whether you know the version that they have in the cluster.
I can get
Yeah,
it.
it's like yeah,
Yeah,
like it's
that's
better
the
that you
original reason
consider.
you got that error. Like when you run in the Minikube, it created a 1.16 cluster, which doesn't have that extension V1 beta thing. So that API group is not there. That's why you get that error.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like yeah, we'll have to look into like possible ways of like minimalizing this like the local setup and the like just getting started up with this Cellery setup thing a bit simplify that and like see how we can make it more user friendly, and like especially with the download side I can see that there are lots of concerns with that. Yeah, we'll take that up in the coming releases, yes. And I think as I like Madhuka, we are already planning for a like a revamp of Cellery setup, right? Like you mentioned, so like we can like take this up there as well.
Yes, we are planning to improve the usability and user experience of the setup command. So yeah.
So you
We
probably, as
can know.
you just tried it, like I would just like to get your feedback overall on the Cellery setup. I mean, the setup time. Like, how did you feel? Like you had a lot of failures on the Minikube and other place and other environments. So, like, what was their painful parts on those things?
Oh,
Not everything
Mainly
painful, right?
only
oh, it's
yeah.
so even though like I would say I don't know, but I would say like the documentations, if you
Okay.
can make it more clear and what's going on and like as you said, if you have already faced some issues, you can find those out and so
So
and, yeah.
yeah,
But what even though like if I see everything is successful and if I can't go to the store, that's
Yeah,
kind of weird.
that's weird, right? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like the first issue you face is about because of this Minikube version, and it was like starting a cluster of 1.16, so that like it was not compatible. So I think like in our docs when we are uh, like starting up, we should clearly specify that like this version policy that we are like still in 1.14 and like it will only be compatible with 13 and 15.
Mm.
Or like we could actually like if you are installing to existing setup, we can do a kubectl version and check and give a
Oh yeah,
error,
that's
right?
also would do. Like we can do a
That
prompt
will
check
be the,
and
probably the best option.
yeah. Otherwise, like even the people does actually not read lot of text also if you provide. So that's a natural behavior. So I think that's a good option, Nadu. Then we
Yeah.
have
Adding Cellery, validate through the Cellery
yeah
CLI.
yeah. So
Yeah.
let's see, like whatever the important thing we have to validate before before installing.
Yeah, Kubernetes and STO both.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that should be better. Yes.
Yeah, there are other places also we can add that feature. Other giving the failure message, we can do validations, right? So,
Mm. Okay.
Some kind of like once it started up, something like how to test that our store is running properly, something like after the setup is completed, how to test everything is working fine. Some
Okay.
notes like that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Because, yeah.
All right. Yeah. That's like, yeah, we'll take a note of that, Ram. Thank you so much for that feedback. Yes, that's very useful.
Yeah.
Cellery runtime status kind of thing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
is
like,
more kind of a health check, right? You need like hearts, whether it's
Yeah.
Health check or runtime status, like
Yeah.
The
So I
thing is
was
like we already have a status command for the what are the components activated,
For the
right, in
system
your class.
components, yeah. So
Yeah.
like
So we may
probably
need
like
some kind of a health
some.
check.
Yeah.
so yeah. So when I was installed it after that, yeah, I did a status. Then I started. I went to the modify and I started the API manager again. But after that, I added the etc host as well, the entry, but still I couldn't do that with Minikube. But it was working fine with the local. But like if you guys can do some other stuff which provides me like what is actually wrong, so I don't know whether it might be status or runtime, but something some or else like a very descriptive error message
Mm.
at the end. So once it started up, like once it done the cluster, when everything is working, like once the setup is completed, you do some health check by inside some script and gives us some responses, like whether it's successful or whether it's not successful, or what I should do next.
Mm.
Something like this command I can use next to see some stuff.
Mm.
Okay.
Then we can deploy some default services or cell or something and get some.
I think this is rather more about the system health, but yeah, like yeah, we will have to think through this. Yes.
Yeah, they, like they have to know what to do next, right? Okay. So
Yeah. So Ram, thank you so much again for that feedback. That's very useful, especially in the initial stages of this. And like we are great. We are really glad that you were able to finally like get it to work using the local setup. And like we'll check into like the possibility of like improving the Minikube using Minikube as well. That option as well.
Yeah, actually that is very helpful, and maybe like if you get any error, like you can directly ask it from Slack, like like if you got
Yeah.
like
Just
you
like
got
dump
that API
everything.
manager, like if you ask that, like we can directly reply like search, and so that's a good thing.
Yeah,
So,
just like dump everything,
Yeah.
like all the information you have, and like just like use the Slack and let's like see how to get through this.
okay.
Also, like sometime, I mean, few days back, I actually reported an issue, like maybe to introduce some sort of inspect command for the system. That, I mean, I don't know whether we should do it right away, but that should actually be helpful. I think, like,
when
I
we
mean,
are
even though
having problems, it's very
yeah,
helpful to inspect. I mean, yeah, to get all the required information, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
even though we asked Siram to actually dump all the information, I think getting all the information will actually take a lot of,
Right.
yeah, going back and forth. Maybe that's something we should
Yeah, so
try.
like what I mean is like whatever the information he has, like of
Yeah,
course, like yeah, yeah. So
Guys, I think we are running out of time also. So shall we wrap up then?
yeah, yeah. So yeah. So like let's very briefly look at like now the we actually released early 0.50 today. The vote was closed today afternoon, I think IST time, and like now it's like the release is published to GitHub and like the installing locations as well. So let me quickly share my screen and like yeah, just like. Very quickly, I'll like yeah. So can you all see my screen now?
Yes,
So,
we get it.
Yeah, so like in our 0.5 release, the main change that we did was like upgrading our Ballerina version to 103, which is the GA version of Ballerina, which is a important milestone for the language. And we did the major architecturing and refactoring of the CLI to make it like more extensible and testable. And we did the initial Cellery tooling design. It's not the design only, the tooling is not actually available. The Cellery specific tooling is not readily available yet. It will be probably be available in the next release. And there were some other improvements, such as like moving the STS for the composite use cases to the Cellery system, as well as removing the unwanted istio components, which are like taking a bit of resources again. So like those were the like main features. This is not really a big feature packed release, but like we had that Ballerina upgrade and the CLI refactoring stuff as the main points for this release. So if I like quickly go through what you have planned for 0.6 as well, just give us a couple of minutes. For 0.6, let me share my screen again. Yeah. So yeah, for 0.6, we have actually a number of items planned. We have categorized them here. Unfortunately, like we haven't updated the GitHub project board yet. So like these are the tentative tasks that we have listed down in this Excel sheet. In the runtime, we are like planning to do this namespace separation and like the admission controller for validation purposes, because like otherwise it's hard to like stop any junk or garbage getting into the controller side and like messing it up. For the observability, we are hoping to add the ability to separate out the data using namespaces and like users, because like currently it's everything is in one it's not like basically separated out, so like anyone who can log in can view all the data. And CLI, one of the main things that we came up in this discussion as well, we have to improve our setup user experience. We'll be like taking that up as soon as possible. And there are some other like improvements that we need to do from the code as well. And yeah, another important thing is our Helm based installation, which will be like available in 0.6, the next release. They are which currently we are not using the Helm to like manage our dependencies and everything, so it's a bit painful from the CLI side. We believe that once we move to Helm, it will be like it will actually simplify the things. And there are few improvements that we have to do from the Cellery test sites, and like some non-blocking issues we had in the last few days of testing. And one of the important things again is the first cut of this Cellery ID, VS Code plugins, and the tooling. So like we are hoping to like release those with 0.6, and like that will be like a good advantage for a cell developer to get the real development experience of a cell without just like using without just like copy pasting code and editing it. So basically those are the planned items for 0.6. These are of course tentative ones, like there might be some stuff, important stuff coming in and like some stuff getting deprioritized, but these are the list of tasks that you have planned for now. Yeah, I think like as per the agenda, that's all we have. So yeah, I think we can wrap up today's community call by that, and like thank you so much again, Irham, and everyone else for joining in, and especially Irham for your feedback, which will be very important for us to like make Cellery much more usable. So thank you so much guys, and like until the next time, thanks, bye, and take care.
Bye.
Bye guys.
Bye.